Hi, and welcome back to Thone's Translation Nibbles number 2, covering Luke 2, verses 19 and 20. And this is again there's a 2 and a 2A and a 2B to be covered here today. We start out with, again, reminding you about the difference between the majority text and the minority text, and the fact that some are of word-by-word translations and some are thought-by-thought or concept-by-concept. And again, reminding you that the spelling is somewhat unexpected in some of the old Bibles. So we have, the base thing we're going to be studying today, coming from the KJV Oxford Paragraph version, which is the version that you're likely to have in your possession if you are a person who uses KJV. And it says, verse 19, "But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart." And in verse 20, "And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them." Now, that's, a well-known section of Scripture. It's at the time and immediately after when the shepherds came to visit the newborn Christ. There are the same kinds of variations in the older Bibles, and both in spelling and in words almost. Like in the Wycliffe Bible, shepherds is spelled S-C-H-E-E-P-H-E-R-D-I-S. That's shepherds. And it sort of, if you sound it out, you can sort of convince yourself that makes sense. But and glorifying, Glorifyinge. So we're those are all the same, and in all these studies, and it's the only reason I'm including these older ones is occasionally you see something where the thinking actually has changed since the very old version, and that's very interesting to observe that. So that's them all, and then we're going to first look at Nibbles 2a, which is Luke chapter 2, verse 19. And that's, "But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart." And what we see is that when we go to all 14 translations, they're very similar. Number one, they all mention Mary, which is kind of key. Number two, they mention what she did, and that is kept, treasured, or was treasuring. That is the things that she heard about her baby boy. She kept them, she treasured them, and more was treasuring them. Number three, what did she keep? Things, words, and sayings. Again, very similar thought there. What she did about them? She was pondering them. she was meditating on them, or she was in careful thought about them. Again, very similar concepts. And where did she keep them? In 13 of the cases, she kept them in her heart. In the 14th case, she kept them deep within herself, meaning sort of the same thing. So, based upon this one verse, you would say that these all seem to be reasonable translations. And, in fact, they all pass along the same situation, the same actions, the same results, the same everything, basically. And so, based on that one verse, at least, all of these 14 are good translations. Then we can push right on along into 2b, which is Luke chapter 2, verse 20. And if we do a parallel comparison like we did before in this verse, we find that, number one, the subject is the shepherds in all 14. Number two, the action done by the shepherds. They returned, they turned again, and they went back in all 14 cases. So they all, again, in good agreement, just slightly different thought process. Reactions. They were glorifying, praising, honoring, lauding, and were ecstatic to God. All 14 cases. Number four, the reason for these reactions. What they had heard or what they had seen in all 14. The communications. As it was told, or as it was said, or as it was spoken, or just as the angel had told them, exactly the way, or the next one is exactly the way it had been told to them, or just like the angel has said. And that's all 14 of them have a comment that was like observing that what happened was exactly what the angel had told them was going to happen, and sometimes the angel was specifically called an angel, and other times it was just the one who told me. Now, so up to that point, everything is right in line. The final point here is, I'm going to call it an odd phrase from the Message Bible. The shepherds returned and let loose, glorifying and praising God for everything they had heard and seen. And of course, the term let loose is the term that we're questioning here. It's clearly not the thought which Luke was thinking when he wrote this gospel. Let loose was not in the vocabulary until just a very few years ago. It sounds like the author, to me, is insulting the reader by implying the reader is only conversant in urban trash talk, which is sort of what this is. It might also be considered an ethnic slur. Now remember, the author, the old minister who retired and wrote the book, wrote the Message Bible, intended it to be one that everybody could read. And so by including this urban, I call it trash talk, the talk of people in urban settings that are not positive, could be an ethnic slur. And what ethnicity kind of depends on where you are. It might be an African American slur if you are in the South. It might be a Hispanic slur if you are in the Southwest or West. I'm not saying that it was intended that way, but it certainly could be interpreted that way. So I am displeased with the Message Bible because it both insults the more experienced reader, and it also lowers itself down, the Bible down to a very low level to try to get others to understand it, as if they couldn't understand without that phrase in it. So it isn't like that phrase is substituted for something else. It says the shepherds returned and let loose, glorifying and praising God for everything they had heard and seen. If you leave and let loose out, and the shepherds returned, comma, glorifying and praising God for everything they had heard and seen, I believe that most everyone would understand that, and the reason that they might not understand that is that they don't understand what glorifying and praising God relates to, but I don't think that letting loose exactly helps that understanding. In fact, we could say that they let loose with a long string of curse words, and that would make just as much sense as this does here. So it does not edify the Bible and the Scriptures. It just drags trash talk into it, in my opinion. Remember, these are my opinions, and I will be happy to discuss them with you. If you see a good reason, in this case, where let loose helps the story to anybody that speaks English. So this was a fairly easy one today. Everything except the one two-word phrase agrees between all the translations, so there wasn't a big deal. As we come along towards the next ones, it becomes more and more difficult. We're going, with the first two here, one was in John, a gospel, and one was in Luke, a gospel, and there's not a lot of controversy about what those particular phrases meant. We're going to get into a much more theological area in the next couple of lessons. That is Romans chapter 3, verses 25 and 26, and Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. And those we will find there's more difference in those than in the first two that we did. And that's really where while we're doing doing this is to look and see that, first of all, most translations of the Bible are sort of similar, and secondly, in seeing in what situations they're different, and where we need to be careful and where we can be quite confident. So until next time, which will probably be from the time you read this or hear this, this is the 23rd of August. I'm recording this, and I believe the 25th of August is when we will have the study on Romans chapter 3, 25 through 26. So until then, contact me if you have questions, and talk to you then. Bye-bye.